I think in the Bay Area, because a lot of people's issue is not with their income, they make a pretty good income, but they don't necessarily have enough down payment. So either they'll get a gift from family, or a lot of people are using.
Hi, I'm Henry, and I'm here today with Esther, and today we're going to chat buying a house in the Bay Area. Esther, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
Word on the street is that you know how to buy houses. How many years have you been working in the real estate business?
I've been in the industry for about 7 years now. I help people obtain a mortgage to buy a house. So most people don't have all the cash to come in with a $1 million home. So they'll come in with a portion of their own down payment, and the rest of the financing they'll get from a lender. So that's the part that I do. I help them find a lender.
How does one go about buying a house?
So first step, I would recommend people getting their financing together. So usually there's kind of a laundry list of items they need to put together in order to get pre-approved. That way they have something concrete to work with, and they're not wasting their own time or their realtor's time, looking for dream homes outside of their budget. Make sure that they're comfortable with the payment, with the structure. That's something that they can deal with financially. And then once you have that, then you are free to go house shopping and make offers.
Is there like a quick rule of thumb in terms of how much you can afford?
Most lenders will take 43% of your gross income that you make. And if your debt is below 43%, then that's good. And that's including your housing debt, in your entire mortgage payment, property taxes that you will be incurring, and the insurance or any HOA fees, and also your other debts, like if you have credit cards, student loans, car loans, etc.
Let's apply it to a real person's situation. Let's say a person is earning $120,000 in gross income and their monthly rent is $1,000. How much can that person afford?
If this person is making $120,000 a year, so they're making $10,000 a month, and you safely multiply or conservatively multiply that by 43%, so that's $4,300 per month. And so you want to make sure that the housing payment, including the mortgage, property tax, insurance, and HOA fee is under $4,300. So that would probably amount to around depending also on how much down payment they can bring in, probably around a $700 or $800,000 price range.
And how much does one need to put down in down payment to buy a house?
So nowadays there's a lot of different down payment options. Usually the most standard is, of course, people hear the 20%. You might get a better rate if you go for 25 or 30% or 40%, but if you have enough for 20%, that's pretty good. You're going to get a pretty standard rate. But there's also programs that allow you to go with 10% or 5%, even 3%, and if you're a veteran, potentially 0%. So there's all kinds of programs out there that I think enable people to buy their first home.
What are the most common or most popular programs?
I think in the Bay Area, because a lot of people's issue is not with their income, they make a pretty good income, but they don't necessarily have enough down payment. So either they'll get a gift from family, or a lot of people are using a 10% down program where they have a first loan up to 80%, and then they'll tack on the second loan for 10%. And then eventually when they get a bonus or they can sell their stock, they'll pay off the second and then keep the first. So there are also different type programs depending on where you are and what your long-term and short-term goals are. Usually the fixed programs are the most standard for those who are very low risk. That's 30, 20, or 15 years. It's the fixed same payment, same rate until you pay off the entire loan. And then there's the adjustable rate mortgages, which comes in usually terms of 3, 5, 7, and 10. And they usually are still paid off within 30 years, but the first the first number is the number of years that it's fixed for. So actually for a lot of people who are getting into their first home and they work in the tech industry, I would actually recommend, if there's a big margin of difference between the fixed product and the ARM product, to go with an ARM, because a lot of people don't keep their house for more than, their first house anyway, for more than 10 years. So a lot of my clients who are a little bit more risk tolerant, they will ride the ARM to ARM to ARM. So they'll ride the lower rate of the 5 or 7 one, and then when the next dip comes, they'll convert it into another ARM and then do that until their loan's paid off.
What would you say are the pros and cons of a fixed mortgage rate versus an ARM?
So the fixed, the pros is of course the stability. You know for sure that the payment's not going to change. If you have a life event later on, you know exactly what the payment is going to be. I think the downside of that is that if there's a big rate premium, say sometimes it's a 0.375% rate or a 0.5% rate difference, you're really paying for an expensive insurance for 30 years because most people actually they come back to refinance for one reason or another within 5 to 7 years, or if long, 7 to 10 years. So if you're getting a 30-year, it's great for the stability, and of course for people who are near their retirement or toward the end of their career, I would recommend they stay in a fix. But then if you're just kind of starting your career, you know that your income is most likely going to grow, you're going to be able to qualify for more, then I would recommend the ARM. The ARM, the downside is that of course after the fixed period, it's going to be adjustable according to the market. So if the market rate is a little bit higher, then the rate will be higher. But there have been incidences where the rate has come down as well.
You had mentioned that income hasn't been a problem for people. It's been like coming up with that funds for the down payment.
Yeah.
What are some creative ways that you've seen people do to come up with that amount?
So for the down payment, if you're fortunate, you have families helping you with a gift. If you're less fortunate, you're on your own, then a lot of people actually have been borrowing from their 401ks. They will probably go for a product like I mentioned before where they do less of a down payment now, but they'll still keep a pretty good rate on the first mortgage and kind of just tack on a second. And then the second works kind of like a credit card on the equity of your house. So it's a home equity line of credit where the first 10 years you kind of can take, say you have a $100,000 line amount and say I needed it to purchase the house. And later you were able to pay that back over time, and you have a $100,000 line again. Then you decide, okay, in the next 2 to 3 years, I want to remodel my house. So you can take the money out again, and you pay interest on whatever's outstanding on the balance. So if you pay it all off, then you're not paying anything on the interest. But if you take the money out, then you pay the interest.
And just to clarify, the second loan, the credit card loan, or the similar
HELOC.
HELOC.
Yeah.
So the second loan or the HELOC loan that kind of acts like a credit card, can you use that amount towards your down payment?
So typically when people are buying a house, they're struggling to come up with a down payment. So that's where the second line comes in, as they'll disperse the funds in order to purchase the home. And that is part of the down payment.
You mentioned that people can withdraw from their 401k or get money from their friends or family members. What are the tax implications for those methods?
For getting a gift, I know a lot of people are concerned about triggering the gift tax, $14,000 that you report every year. It hasn't been an issue for us, mainly because you can also apply it toward the lifetime gift amount, which is, I think, from 2018 tax reform laws, something like 11 point something million. So people rarely reach that amount. So while you can report it on your tax returns, you don't necessarily have to pay taxes on the gift, even if it's in 200,000, 300,000, which we come across all the time. In terms of the 401k, you get a loan from yourself, and you're still paying back the interest maybe per month or from your pay stub, and the interest still goes back to you. So I don't think there's a penalty depending on if you're purchasing the property as your primary residence and you apply for a 401k loan for that reason, then I don't believe there are any tax implications.
Speaking of the Bay Area, what has the Bay Area housing market been like?
The Bay Area housing market is very unique in the sense that the demand is always very high. So I know it's kind of a struggle for people to get into their first home because they always feel like they have to push way over their budget. It has been leveling out a little bit, but there are ways to kind of like the 10% down program we were talking about, or other ways to leverage how to get into your first home. And my advice would just be get in when you can. Because I have a client, they came to me 3 years ago, and it's this really sweet couple who just had their first kid and they wanted to move into their first home. And so we're evaluating their financials. We knew that at the end of the year they wanted to buy a home. And we're just a little bit short on the down payment. Their income is just where it is. We're short a little bit by maybe $40,000 or $50,000. for them to get what they wanted. So they made up their mind and said, okay, I'm going to get a raise next year, and then we're going to save aggressively. So they came back to visit me 1 year later, and we reevaluated where their financials were. And even though they had saved up significantly more money and he also got a raise, the prices had already gone up. So he was actually in the same place that he was a year and a half ago. So get in when you can. I know the rates, sometimes people are very bothered by, oh, how much are the rates? But the market rates go up and down. As long as you have a stable job, you can find a downtime to kind of reduce the interest rate if possible.
Looking into the future, do you see the Bay Area market ever declining, or do you think it's always going to grow?
I think it's hard to say short term because prices are leveling out a little bit, and even on our end, we're seeing a lot of appraisals coming in a little bit low, much lower than before. But for sure, I think long term, it will always grow. Just like, after the financial crisis, we all took a dip, but it didn't take very long for us to recover back.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing your advice and tips on how to buy a home.
Thank you.